put your hands together. Welcome to the gathering.
This little life of mine, I'm gonna let it down.
A few years ago, a gathering began, a fusion coalition. The New Testament has that word in Greek that we translate church, but that word in common English is really the gathering. And the gathering of people who wouldn't have any other good reason to be together, but something brought them together. That's that ecclesia, that gathering.
We've got to challenge the war economy. Right now, because of military arrogance, taxpayers in the United States are spending nearly $4 trillion for wars since 2001. That money could have been used to transform our nation. $1 billion of our bloated military budget could pay for 12,000 elementary school teachers, 17,000 infrastructure jobs, 100,000 Head Start slots for children, 30,000 scholarships for university students. Now the question is, what will make us safer? More and more and more and more money for building the mother of all bombs, or money for jobs, education, healthcare, and infrastructure? That's the question. And that's the question we must put before America.
Well, Reverend Barber, I believe we have a gathering. We have a gathering, and that's where we're going to start.
All right, family. Well, thank you all again for being here tonight. We look forward to a great program. So I ask that you just sit back, you relax, enjoy yourself, and let's put our hands together for our host for tonight, Brother Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove. Let's show him some love as he comes tonight.
Thank you, Reverend Williams. I haven't quite finished my tweet yet, so let me give you a chance to finish while I finish mine here. Poor People's Campaign, welcome to the gathering. So glad to be with you tonight. Customarily, I'm here with my brother, Reverend William Barber, who was called on to do a funeral this afternoon, so he's finishing that up now. Hopefully, he'll be able to join us by the end. But we are very excited this week to be partnering with a few organizations that I wanted to mention here at the beginning. 350.org. Anybody here connected with 350.org? Got some folks in the house. You'll learn more about them as we go along, but a worldwide grassroots organization working to resist and climate change and end our devastation of our common home. We're also partnering this evening with Our Children's Trust, an organization that is sponsoring the Youth v. Gov lawsuit, which you'll learn more about in a little bit. And we have folks here in the house who are connected with Appalachian Voices. All right, we're very, very grateful for the work that Appalachian Voices have been doing here in North Carolina and in other parts, and we'll learn more about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline a little later on. The Poor People's Campaign has continued to be on the road this past month. I hope you're following it. I'm going to put off the update on the Poor People's Campaign until the end in the hopes that Reverend Barber can get here to share some stories from the road with you all. But let's get started with some music this evening, and let me hand this over to the band. Good to be with you.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Oh, my. Let me try that again. Good evening. Good evening. All right, that sounds better. I know you all were looking for Yara. This is gathering number 5, right? And so you know that normally we do a thing called a jump-off choir, right? Don't y'all act like y'all brand new. This ain't my first time here. So I know that we do the jump off band. So since we do the jump off band, I don't want to be lonely up here by myself. I'm going to ask if about 5 or 6 people don't make me pick you out, come up here and join me. I know it's kind of tight, but I need some company up here. I promise I won't ask you to do anything that you're not halfway familiar with. We're going to start with woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Y'all have heard that several times, right? So we're going to do 2 little pieces of that, and then we're going to move to a song by Marvin Gaye. That's one thing I like about the gathering, is because it's not like we're like in a traditional church, so we can do some of what we want to do. And so we want to do Mercy, Mercy Me by Marvin Gaye. And when he wrote this song, he wrote it in 1971 thereabout, and he wrote it to reflect the things that were going on in the earth. Isn't it something that they are equally as bad, probably worse now than they were then? And so the song is still very applicable. I'm still waiting for my 5 or 6 people to join me. Don't y'all eat up my singing time. Come on, come on. Woke up this morning 2 times around. Let's go. That's all right. We're gonna do it together. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind, yeah, stayed on freedom. Well, I woke up this morning with, stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. Oh, I woke up this morning, had my mind stayed on free. Oh, I woke up this morning, had my mind. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah. Now we just did this. Well, I'm texting and tweeting with my mind. Don't move. It ain't over. We get ready to do Mercy, Mercy Me. This is a moving song, so I want you to put your hands together. Move around if you want to. It'll be great. And we need some more people to do it.
I want everybody to stay in justice jump off choir mode, but I'm just coming back to introduce you to somebody real quick. Now, we talk a lot in this movement that we're trying to build about the intersection of our issues and how we need what we call fusion politics. Y'all know that word, right? Fusion politics. We got to get used to seeing how the issues that impact you and the issues that impact me intersect with each other in some deep ways. Am I right? Well, we also felt like we need to have a little bit of fusion music here. All right? We got a lot of different cultures coming together, a lot of different stories, and so if y'all been in town this week, you know it's been Bluegrass Festival here in Raleigh. So we got some Marvin Gaye tonight, but we also got some bluegrass. Let me introduce to you Charles Petty and Franklin Golden. Come lead us in a song.
Right. The bottom drops out of the sound.
That's awesome, Freddie. Thank you so much.
Just do a little something with some strings here. Little Genesis 1. Pretty much straight recitation starting around verse, I don't know, about day 4. So Genesis 1. I have a group called Folk Psalm for you, at Folk Psalm. That's FOLKPSALM. We're going to sing a psalm. Invite you to join us on a psalm later. But this is, as I say, Genesis 1. I like what the Franciscan monk Richard Rohr says. He says so much of modern Christianity are Genesis 3 people. They start at Genesis 3, original sin, and they build from that. And he's like, the Franciscans start with Genesis 1, original blessing.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it was good. And so if you'll sing with us, it was good. It's like, it was good, it was good, it was very good. God saw everything God made, it was so, so very good. Can y'all handle that? Mercy me. All right, let's do it. I'm going to kick it off on the guitar for the man from Deep Gap, Mr. Doc Watson, idol of mine. So we'll kick it off like this. It was good, it was good, it was very good. God saw everything God made, it was oh so very good. And then God
Marvin, Gaye, and bluegrass tonight. Mercy me, it's good. All right. Well, we're focusing on ecological devastation and climate change tonight because one of the things that we learned here in North Carolina in the moral movement, and we've learned as we go around the country, is that the same powers, the same forces that weigh down on poor people, that want to take away health insurance, that want to make it harder for folks to live in many situations, are the same ones that don't respect the earth and care for our common home. I like what Pope Francis has taught us to call the earth, our common home. One of the reasons we wanted to focus on climate justice this week is because this week is the Saint Day for Francis of Assisi. You know, the Richard Rohr, who he quoted earlier, is a Franciscan, after those Franciscans that started in Italy and spread this good news that God is for the poor. But the other thing that went right along with it from the very beginning is that to be close to the poor is to be close to God's creation. Francis used to preach to the birds because Francis said if God made them, then the good news is for all of us the same. Now, part of what we need to dig into tonight is that that connection that we often focus on that between us and our neighbor, you know, how we're so easily separated and distanced from our neighbor. That connection has also been broken between us and our common home, the earth. And so we want to begin by digging into that with a few interviews. And one of the things that I'm just tickled by as I dig into this is that young people are leading the way to challenging the injustice against the climate. Can I get an amen? Somebody start to clap there. And one of the things we learned actually from some of our sisters and brothers who join us every month from Oregon, we learned about some folks they know who are plaintiffs on a case called Youth v. Gov. Young people who are suing the government because the government and those who lead it, no matter whether they're Republicans or Democrats, because we've had both in power for decades now, since we've known about the climate science that says if we don't do something, not only are we going to have like dirty water or dirty air, if we don't do something, we're going to have a chaotic world that bears little resemblance to the world that we've known for as long as people have been on it. And these young people have said, you know, if the Constitution guarantees us some basic rights, you know, then the government has a responsibility to make sure that we have the opportunity to have life and liberty and property and the ability to live and educate our children in the future, and to not only deny climate science but to not do anything about the implications that we've known about for decades is to, in some ways, forfeit the right to represent people in the United States. That's what these young people have been saying. And I was so moved by what they're saying that I reached out to one of the plaintiffs. I believe he's 21 years old. His name is Jacob Label. He lives on a farm in Oregon, and I wanted to learn more from him about what this was about. And I said, I want you to come to the gathering. And he said, I want to share. But we said, you know, Oregon to North Carolina is a long way. And what with the carbon impact of a plane flight and all, let's see if we can use our technology to bring you here. All right? So if you'll turn your attention right here to this screen, I'm going to have a conversation with Jacob that we pre-recorded from the farm in Oregon. All right. Hello, Jacob.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Glad you can be with us all the way from the farm in Oregon. Tell us just real quickly about where you are right now.
So I'm on my beautiful family farm out in the hills of southwest Oregon, and I'm really, really glad to be with all of you today.
we're so glad to have you. Folks here have learned a little bit about the case that you're involved in. I just wanted to ask first, what made you decide to sue the government over climate change?
So ever since I was probably 8 or 9 years old and I watched An Inconvenient Truth, I just realized that climate change was going to be the challenge, the crisis of my life, of our century. And it's also, I think, a very personal challenge to each one of us. Like, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to get up every day and live your life in a way that you can, look your grandchildren and your children in the eye and said, I did something. I tried to stop this. Or I helped stop this, which is what we're trying to do. And what's really, really special about this lawsuit for me, personally, which I didn't know when I first joined, but as I kind of deepen my understanding, is we're bringing the best climate science into the courts, where it can't be dismissed like it is in our political arena. So Dr. James Hansen, called the father of climate science, is on our case. He's supporting our case. He's giving the prescriptions for the national science-based climate recovery plan that we're asking the courts to help us implement. So we have some of the best science on our side. So that's something that's really made me want to be a part of this case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a long history in this country of having to win in court something that then, has to really become implemented in terms of long-term change. I mean, that's a huge piece of the history of the civil rights movement and the Brown decision. And you all are hoping to get that decision. But I was thinking about how, with climate change, there's both this like macro systemic thing that's going on, but there's also the way that just like each of us in our lives have become divorced from our home, the earth. And I just want to, especially since you're there on the farm, and we talked about doing this over Skype so that you wouldn't have to get on a plane and come over here and have all the carbon footprint and interruptions that is. But I just wanted to ask, like, what there in your life kind of keeps you grounded? What's connecting you to our common home here on Earth?
Well, I think that there's not enough people. There's too many people that get up in this world and are just absorbed in the digital world, or they're hurting, or they're hungry, or they're sick, and that all ties into the environmental, or they're in a war zone, and before you can talk about an environmental, problem or crisis, it's kind of bound up in all of these things. So to me, it's such a huge problem, and you have to really kind of address it in a really personal way. For me, staying grounded is, working on the farm is a hugely important part of it, because if I was raised in an environment that was, we grow all of our own food, nearly all of our own food. I grew up doing chores, raising animals, playing in the creeks in the forest. And that gives you that understanding, and I grew up in a wonderful, loving family, and that gives you that understanding of kind of what life should be like. And I don't think the way that we live our lives in our cities and the way that we relate to each other is a very human way of relating. And so I really want to kind of dedicate my life to creating these more human environments that are in harmony with nature. Poetry and meditation and prayer has been really, really important for me, and faith that if I'm at the right place at the right time and I do what I'm supposed to be doing, and I just really try to do my best, then things are going to work out, even if I don't know exactly how. People don't realize that Earth, just like our bodies, is like a temple, and so I think a lot of religious people are just way off track with how they treat the environment and the earth. You can't have a church without an earth.
Yeah, a lot of our indigenous sisters and brothers talk about the earth as our mother, and sometimes it makes me think that in the modern world we have something of an attachment disorder. We a lot of us just like haven't attached well with our mother. And that's traumatic. But you're talking about practices, sort of daily and weekly practices of both spirituality and very practical, like engagement with soil and stuff that connects you to the earth. I wonder, when you have that connection, you also feel the grief of the way, that our mama's being attacked. And I wanted to ask, just like, what's the most recent disaster there? Y'all have had fires out there, right?
We couldn't see the sky for about 2 weeks. Maybe I saw the sky maybe for 2 or 3 days. Out here it was thick smog. It looked like the pictures you see in Beijing. It was also very frightening because a fire could wipe out all the work that we've put into the farm for the last 17 years. Yeah, it was something else.
Yes, so as you see, in some ways, the fires, the earthquakes, the hurricanes that we're all watching on the news every day are what climate scientists like, Dr. Hansen have been trying to tell us for decades. And as you see that and think about the sort of mammoth proportions of this challenge, I just wanted to ask, what gives you hope? What gives you hope to press on and to believe that we can change this in your generation?
So, like you said, I think we live in very dark times, but I think that just makes hope all the stronger. And the way I see it, the climate crisis is also an enormous opportunity for change and transformation and growth. And I think what we're doing with the lawsuit is part of that, because we're, one, giving youth a really, really powerful voice. Youth are extremely important for the future. They are, our hope. They are the ones who will, inherit the earth. And so we're giving youth a voice to share their stories, how they're affected. My friend Jaden in Louisiana was flooded. Levi was affected by hurricanes. And they're still, brilliant and energetic and passionate and aware. And they're sharing their stories and changing the world. And two, we're bringing people together from different faiths and science. We're building this dialogue. We had amicus briefs that were just filed from, anything from the Sisters of Mercy, Catholic organizations, the Zen Temple in San Francisco, Greenpeace, Earth Justice, law professors, all supporting our case. So really my hope for the future lies with, each one of you watching this today, because I know there's thousands of you, and if each one of you gets up and, wakes up and find your meaning in your work, whether it's a lawsuit or whether it's teaching a kid or raising a kid, or working on a farm or building a new piece of technology, that's my hope, really. That's in each one of us. We hold it in our hands and it just glows the brighter even though it's dark. I think climate change is a huge opportunity. It affects every single one of us in a way that no other crisis ever has. So, we can look at it as a way to bring us all together.
Well, thank you, my brother. That's a beautiful description of what we call fusion politics and why we have a gathering. So thank you for being with us here at the gathering.
Thank you all.
So Jordan is watching from Oregon tonight, or I guess it's afternoon out there. Y'all thank him for sharing with us tonight. All right. At the end of the program tonight, whether you're here live or online, you're going to get an action sheet, and on that action sheet you can learn more about the case Youth v. Gov and how you can support them as they go to trial next February. So let's be sure and keep up with them and follow that case. I'm excited that young people are leading us really on climate justice. And what also came up a little bit there in the interview and in a lot of the movements that I've tried to pay attention to across the country and really around the world is that in addition to young people, it's the indigenous people, the native people in various places who not only have paid attention when the white man wasn't paying attention, but also were in many cases wise enough to write into treaties a right to fish and hunt the lands, a right to the water on the land. And so in some cases, legal battles are actually being won because of the wisdom of the elders of the indigenous communities that put that into the treaties a long time ago. It's what you call insight and foresight, and we're grateful for it. So since we're here in North Carolina, and one of the major expansions of carbon that we're facing here in North Carolina is the Atlantic Coast Pipeline that's proposed to run through Virginia and down into North Carolina. All right, there's folks here who don't want it, but some of the folks who've been leading the way are members of the Lumbee tribe here in eastern North Carolina. So let me invite up Jordan Revels, who is a student at UNC Pembroke. Come on up here and have a seat on the stool. And I'll also just go ahead and invite Ryan Emmanuel, who, in addition to being a member of the tribe, is also a scientist who has studied this stuff and can teach us something this evening. Thanks for being here, Ryan. Now, I know there's another microphone here somewhere. Franklin, would you grab that microphone that's over there and bring it over so we can chat here? Thanks so much for being here, guys. Let me start with you, Jordan. I'll let Jacob hand the baton to you. I think y'all might be about the same age. Is that coming on?
Sound good?
Yeah, great.
Oh.
So would you just share with us, as a student at UNC Pembroke, how did you get involved in wanting to stop a pipeline? I mean, it seems like you'd have homework and stuff to do, but you're also trying to stop a pipeline these days. So how did this happen for you? How'd you get involved?
Well, for me personally, I first started with student government, where my position, this is something that was coming in. It was a major topic that was being talked about on campus. Is this coming through? What's going on? So we actually did research into it, and I was able to actually help write legislation that condemned it on behalf of the student body at UNCP.
All right.
And in addition to that, supporting any and all student initiatives or anyone who was trying to raise awareness for what was going on.
Yeah.
And actually, I did just that. With the help of a lot of different students, I was actually out getting signatures to send into our state representatives, both Tom Tillis and Richard Burr. So we collected about 250 total.
All right.
And actually, there was a walk for the ACP that was being held, and at the very end of that, I was able to meet Miss Donna Chavis. Her and her husband, Mr. Dr. Reverend Mac Ledgerton, who have been doing amazing social justice work in the area for 30 plus years. So I was actually able to get on board with them and both Appalachian Voices for an internship during the summer. And I mean, it's just opened my entire eyes. Like my entire world's been blown away.
So you're linking up across those generations. I know Ryan, Dr. Emmanuel, who's here with us, has been studying this for some time. And I wonder, Ryan, would you just share with us some of what you know about why this pipeline would be so bad for North Carolina and for our world?
Yeah, so a lot of people have focused on the hazards of this pipeline. It's going to be carrying highly pressurized gas and very flammable, explosive material. And so while people are rightly concerned about these dangers associated with a pipeline cutting across their properties, as a scientist who studies climate change, one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the climate change implications of this, particularly for eastern North Carolina. There's new research out that shows that the counties of eastern North Carolina are going to be disproportionately impacted by climate change later this century if we don't do something right away to stop the runaway use of fossil fuels. And so that really concerns me. Rising temperatures, changing rainfall regimes are really expected to wreak havoc on eastern North Carolina and its people.
And I know that, down east, where they're making the case for the pipeline, a lot of times what people hear in the community is, well, this is economic development. This is going to bring something to the community. So I wonder how you're responding to folks down there. I mean, the prospect of a hurricane wiping out your farm is probably not a good thing. But what do you say to those folks who say, look, we're really struggling down here. How can?
Well, first, let's put the moral and ethical issues aside. And if you just want to talk money, it's going to cost a lot more to mediate the impacts of climate change than the economic benefits of a pipeline like this. I don't want to downplay the predicament that these communities and counties are in. People are really struggling, and they're looking anywhere that they can for something to help them through these tough economic times. But there are answers that don't involve another fossil fuel pipeline or more natural gas infrastructure, things like that.
Yeah. And are there folks in eastern North Carolina who are proposing some green energy alternatives that could go in eastern North Carolina that could bring other kinds of economic development? Like, what if you spent the money that you're going to spend on a pipeline on something else? Like what could that look like?
Well, so I want to give Jordan a chance to talk about this, but I want to highlight a recent report that came out by RTI that showed that Robeson County, North Carolina, is one of the hubs of solar power in North Carolina. They've had the largest investment, I think, of any county in North Carolina over the past several years. And you see small-scale solar farms coming up all over the county. So it's really encouraging to see not just talk, but alternative energies put into practice. I don't know, do you want to speak some more on that?
I know personally, I've grown up in Robeson County all my life, and just 2 years ago, you would never see the amount of solar farms that are there now. It's a funny thing, I was actually mapping out all the different solar farms for a film crew to come down and check them out. And it was just fascinating to see how many solar farms we had just in Robeson County. I think there was about, I want to say 6 or 7 in total. And I mean, that's just within like 2 to 3 year time frame in which those were brought in. And they're big time solar farms, and they're providing energy, sustainable energy for all these communities and also the local businesses, to run off of and provide for years to come.
I know when we talked earlier, you had said that you were at a powwow on campus when you first learned about all this and how it was going on. And I, as an outsider, but as somebody who's lived in North Carolina all my life, I know that there's a long tradition among the Lumbee of fighting, big, big forces outside of the community for community survival. So I wanted to ask, since y'all are here and y'all sort of taken on this, like what resources do you draw on from your families, from your growing up in the tribe, that kind of gives you courage as you face a big battle like this?
Well, I think for me in particular, and many Native people can also attest to this, is that the sense of community that we have as Indigenous peoples, it's always been one of the backbones for everything we do. Throughout history and where we are now, that's really something that we've always had to hold on to, is our families, our communities, our tribes. So I feel like for me personally, being able to connect and actually work alongside people like Dr. Ryan Emmanuel, Mac Ledershin, so on and so forth with these local groups, that's really been a big thing for me, being able to have that connection and be like, wow, our people can do awesome things if we actually work together. And that's true not just at the community level, but at the state level as well, where we have all these different organizations and nonprofits who are working together, which they have to in order to stop something as big as this project.
Yeah.
Would you like to speak on that?
I draw from my heroes. I grew up with stories of Henry Berry Lowry, who was our Robin Hood figure. I grew up with stories of my relatives who fought the Ku Klux Klan at the Battle of Hayes Pond.
All right.
I grew up learning from heroes like educator Rosa Rebel Winfrey, who passed away earlier this year. And these are the people, along with my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, who taught me to stand up against things like this.
Well, thank you both for being willing to link up with us here tonight. And we're going to continue to follow the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and be sure and let us know when and where we can join you to resist it.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Let me invite folk song back up to do a psalm with us.
Nathan is getting you verses 3 and 4 of Psalm 37. For those of you that are familiar with Psalm 37, it's got some 23 or 24 verses. It's an acrostic, so it has a couple verses for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. We won't do the whole thing. There are other items on the program tonight, but verses 3 and 4 here will function as a nice refrain. Regarding folk song, we're two members of about a 12 musician collective, and we do have CDs out there. All the money from the CDs, pay what you will, goes back in for making more CDs, or now digital. We're not even going to do CDs in the future probably, but we do have 4 titles, and everything we're doing is on one. And one CD is Songs from Scripture for Care of the Earth, featuring that in particular, but all of them are full of psalms and stuff. So this one, you can see the words, I hope. And so we'll just go into it, and please join in as you're able. Psalm 37, the desires of your heart. Do not worry yourself because of wickedness. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for like the grass they soon will fade and wither, just like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do what is right. You will dwell securely in the land. Take delight in the Lord, and God will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in God, who will not let you down. God will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, and the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. So trust in the Lord and do what is right. You will dwell securely in the land. Take delight in the Lord, and God will give you the desires of your heart. Be still before the Lord, wait patiently for him. Fret not o'er those who prosper in their way. Refrain from anger, turn away from wrath. Those who hope in the Lord shall know God's grace. Trust in the Lord and do what is right. You will dwell securely in the land.
Thank you, folks, Psalm, for being with us tonight. Makes me feel right at home, I'll tell you. My Uncle Tom played banjo on WPAQ in Mount Airy every Saturday night for about 40 years, so I grew up on that stuff. I don't know if I've ever told you that that's really our family's only claim to fame is WPAQ is the radio station in Mount Airy, North Carolina, and that's where Andy Griffith grew up, you know. So if you've seen Mayberry, you know Mount Airy, and Andy didn't bother changing all the names. So Uncle Tom had a brother named Otis. My Uncle Otis, yeah. That was our goodly heritage. Well, thanks for reminding me of all that, guys. I appreciate that. We did not know when we planned to address climate justice this month that climate would be the biggest news story of the month. But sure enough, it has been. Harvey was followed by Irma, followed by Maria, and we've been watching this disaster play out this weekend in Puerto Rico, which is not to forget that there was also an earthquake in Mexico City and that there were also floods in Asia that killed thousands of people that hardly made our news here. I wasn't with y'all back in August because I was on a little sabbatical this summer, and our family got to go see my wife's family up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and kind of like Jacob was telling you, the fires they had in Oregon were also burning all the way up in British Columbia, and we were there. We always go when we can to see her family in Vancouver in July, because July is the month when the sun shines in Vancouver, or August, early August, and we'd only been there a couple of days when the wind shifted and the smoke rolled in, and turns out even if I could have gotten back, I couldn't have been up here to talk because I completely lost my voice after a week in the smoke. We were sitting there in the airport looking out when we were on the way out of town, and I said to Leah, "It looks like a war zone out there." I mean, the smoke just hanging in the air like it had been bombed. So it turns out that the climate is a bigger news story even than the president this month. Not that he's ready to get out of the way, but Earth is reeling, and even the president can't ignore the enormity of the situation. You may have seen on the TV, was it yesterday or the day before, that he noted that the big challenge in Puerto Rico is that it's an island in an ocean, a very big ocean, which is important to understand. I mean, you got to start with that. But I think in addition to that, what we're talking about tonight is that very big ocean is growing, like it's rising and getting hotter, and the systems are all in a mess. What's going on here? I mean, thank you for reminding us, Ryan, that we have science that has been telling us for some time what's been going on. And there's data on this. Here was one piece that I thought was important for us to pay attention to. In the 1970s, in the whole decade of the 1970s worldwide, there were 660 global disasters. Things like we're seeing on the news right now. Major hurricanes, major weather-related disasters, what we sometimes call natural disasters, what people sometimes even call acts of God, although that doesn't make much sense to me. But anyway, there were 660 of those in the whole decade of the 1970s. In the 2000s, that is the last decade that we've completed, there were 3,322. That's 5 times as many, and the scientists tell us that was when there was about a 0.5 degree Celsius of increase in global temperatures. We're at 1 degree Celsius now and trying to figure out if at all possible we can put the brakes on and stop it somewhere at 1.5 or so. In 1988, Dr. James Hansen, who Jacob mentioned, he's a an expert witness on their trial as they go to trial against the government. It turns out he's been trying to say this to the government for some time. In 1988, he famously testified before Congress, and like overnight, the public awareness of global warming actually grew from about a third to nearly 3/4 of people actually began to understand what global warming is, right? That they're, it's kind of like why you shouldn't leave your dog or your child in the car in the summer. Like even if it feels all right out here, when sun comes in and heats it up and the heat can't get out, that this is heating things up. The carbon that we've been putting into the atmosphere when we burn coal and oil and natural gas and tar sands and whatever you can frack out of the earth, like all of that is building up that carbon, and it turns out that it's cumulative. It doesn't just get reabsorbed real fast. It's not like you throw it up and it lands back on the ground. It stays up there for a while. That was such a big deal in 1988 that Time magazine decided to make its cover, the Person of the Year issue, was actually Planet of the Year in 1988, and they said that that the Planet of the Year was our endangered Earth. So the fact that this is a serious issue and that we've known something about it for some time is pretty much before us. The Earth has a fever. Right? And when people started saying global warming, sometimes folks like where I'm from would say, oh, global warming, what do you mean? It was colder last winter than it's ever been. But that's what happens when you get a fever, right? This system that we're living in is kind of like a body. That's what Jacob was saying to us on the video there, right? It's kind of like a body. And if your body gets a temperature, gets a fever, you got those shivers sometimes. And sometimes you got the sweats. But what you know for sure, what you feel for sure in your body is that things are not the way they should be. That there's some chaos going on. That's what we're feeling even now as we see. So here's the thing. We're feeling it. We're seeing these terrible ramifications. And we've known about it, right? We've known that this was a problem. So what happened? If we knew what was happening and we knew what we could do to turn it around, how did we get to the place where we are? I was thinking about this, trying to make sense of it, and I remembered how Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's one of our best writers in the United States today, he had this wonderful essay in The Atlantic not long ago on America's first white president. I hope you got to see it. That's what Nell Painter calls our current president. She said every president before Barack Obama was a white man. But Donald Trump is the first president whose only qualification for the office is that he's a white man. He's our first white president. Anyway, Coates was talking about this fact on the TV the other night, and the guy who was interviewing him said to him, 100 years from now, when people look back, what do you think they're going to say about this presidency? And he paused for a second, and he shook his head, and he said, they're going to say we lost our mind. And when I heard him say it, I thought about this other great book that an Indian writer named Amitav Ghosh has written called The Great Derangement. Any of you who really want to read up on not just the science of what's happening, but all of what's happened in our culture. Here's a novelist who looks at literature and movies and everything about how we imagine the world around us. Because what we're talking about, when we know something is wrong and yet we can't bring ourselves to do anything about it, what we're talking about is a failure, not just of knowledge, but of imagination. A derangement, Ghosh says, almost like we've lost our mind. How did it happen? How did it happen that we went so crazy? I want to suggest maybe we are high on capitalism. You can get so high on something that you're not able to think straight. And if we look at the history of carbon, we have to go back to 1781 when James Watt in England, he perfected this steam engine. Y'all know the importance of the steam engine to the Industrial Revolution, right? Whereas before, I mean, there were factories before the steam engine. People had made machines and had figured out how to harness the energy of the earth to power those machines. You can go over to the State Fair here in a few weeks, and they still got a water wheel over there at the State Fair. You can see how you can use a water wheel to grind meal, or if you rig it all up right, I suppose you could use it to run a machine that would do about anything. But that was somewhat limited, right? Because you can only put a water wheel where there's water, and it's got to be water flowing down fast enough that it can move the wheel. There was always a kind of limitation to the capacity of human beings to harness the energy of nature until this steam engine was invented. What happened was, if you could burn wood or you could burn coal to make a steam engine that would then move the parts of the machine that would make the clothes or roll the cigarettes or whatever needed to be done, there was an incredible capacity to do stuff with power that had been extracted from the earth. Watt was the one who gave us the term horsepower. 350 horses under the hood. That whole notion that we could take the energy from out of the earth and turn it into something that we could use to make and do what we want, that's only a little over 2 centuries old. And lo and behold, though we didn't know it at the time, this supposedly miraculous power that had been extracted from the earth and that quickly built factories that, of course, took the cotton that was grown in this part of the world and shipped them across the ocean to factories and sent them up north to factories that created materials and clothing, and for that we had to have markets that stretched all the world over. And eventually we figured out that we could get the oil out and make more efficient engines, and we could have these cars that go around on roads, and that eventually we could have big cities in this global cosmopolis that are connected by these airplanes. That all of that incredible world that we know is based on extraction. It's based on getting coal and oil and gas out of the earth. Now, I have a suspicion that if anyone had asked them, the people who were picking the cotton that was getting sent on those ships or on those trains or on those trucks to the factories, I have a suspicion that if anyone had asked them back when it was happening, back when the demand for production was ever more and more, back when you had to work from, you know how they say it out in the fields, from caint to caint, from when you can't see in the morning till you can't see at night. If anybody had asked those folks, I have a suspicion that they might have had some wisdom to share about how this system of limitless growth that people got so excited about was a little bit unnatural, how it didn't quite fit with the rhythms of how life had worked, of what was expected. I suspect that there are some people who could have suggested something else way back in the beginning. But this was a powerful thing. This was a powerful thing. And so we have built an economy that is ever growing, that is indeed based on the faith that we never have to stop growing, and is completely based on extracting carbon that has been stored in the earth for millennia. How do we know that this is a problem? And why is this a part of a poor people's campaign? Well, on the one hand, we see everywhere around us that when the earth suffers, the poor suffer first. Right? Isn't that what Puerto Rico's about? I mean, we got help to Houston quick. What is Houston, the 4th largest city in America? There were some important investments there. But my Lord, it's taken a long time to figure out how to get help to an island in a very big ocean. The poor will always suffer first. When the waters rise, of course, when the hurricanes start coming, it's the low-lying lands that are going to flood first. And those are, of course, the places where the real estate has been undervalued or disvalued, the places where poor people have had to relocate. Reverend Barber was in Princeville yesterday, one of the oldest African-American communities in this country, there because they're still recovering from Hurricane Matthew, because that town was founded in low-lying land. The poor will always suffer first. But there's another part of this that connects with poverty that's extremely important, which is that poverty actually makes climate change worse. Brother David shared with me a study from the Roosevelt Institute that just came out that points out that the countries that have the worst inequalities are also the countries that are contributing the most to climate change, right? Because when people are poor, they can't live, for example, in the city close to the workplace. I can see this right where I live. I live in the historic service community to Duke University. Now let's give Duke credit where credit's due. They took down Robert E. Lee. I'm glad they took him down. They've passed a living wage, and they've committed as an institution to be a carbon neutral institution. But Durham, the whole city, just like every other city in this country, is quickly gentrifying. That is, the people that used to want to live in the suburbs are wanting to move to the cities. And when they move into neighborhoods like the historic Walltown, where I live, our property values keep going up. And my neighbors who've been renting there generationally, some for 4 and 5 generations, are being pushed out. Now, they're still doing the service work at Duke University, but now they're having to drive from Roxborough and Bahama. Some of them are driving an hour and a half in the car every day, back and forth to work. Poverty and inequality, that kind of inequality that says there's not affordable housing close to the places where you work in town, that not only means that the poor are going to suffer the most, but that the poverty is actually exacerbating the climate change. The fact that we don't have a transportation system that equitably gets people to the work where they need to be means people are using more fuel, and we're releasing more carbon into the atmosphere. On top of all of this, on top of the fact that we've been high on capitalism, that the poor suffer, and that poverty is exacerbating it, in a gathering like this, in a moral gathering, where we're trying to tap in to the moral and faith resources that we have to confront something like this, we also have to deal with the fact that in the West, there's a kind of Christianity that has made this worse. In environmental circles, for some time, there's been something called the Lynne White thesis. Lynne White came up with this, said that dominionism, the notion that human beings are in charge of the earth and that it's ours to use for our benefit and as we see fit, is actually the germ of an idea that made this madness possible. Environmentalists looked at this thing and said, look, we see what's wrong and we see what we could do about it. Why can't we change? And they looked over around their communities and said, a lot of times it's the preachers and the kind of message that they're preaching that makes it impossible for us to see this. Because if you're going to die and go to heaven when it's all done, if this earth is not your home, then why would it be that important to care for it? Why would it be that important to think about that 7th generation? After all, we might all be raptured before then. That's what I grew up hearing some preachers say. So if our faith traditions are sometimes implicated in the problem, who or what could save us from this mess of global climate change? I think we have to acknowledge that there is a kind of neoliberal blindness to this that crosses the party lines. that we're often dealing with. I mean, Barack Obama used to say, and he was right, that the Republican Party in the United States is the only major party in the world that continues to deny climate science. That's true, but I'm not going to let the Democrats off, because you can both acknowledge the science and still believe that the science is going to save us. Yeah? I mean, isn't that what we've all been hoping for the last 30 years? That we're going to come up with a technological solution that's going to get us out of this mess without us having to change anything about how we live. We love those LED light bulbs. You know, that feels good. I love putting in that light bulb and thinking like, this is using 1/10 of the energy that we used to be using. That makes me feel good. And I don't feel bad about the fact that I have the same number of lights that I always had. This stuff, when you dig into it, it can get really crazy. Do you know some of the ideas that not just scientists, but really well-funded, corporately funded scientists have had about how we can deal with climate change? I dug into this a little bit. Turns out one big idea that they've kicked around, and there have actually been conversations about how this would be regulated, which means that, you know, people have considered it beyond just the theoretical. One idea was that if the light coming in is what's heating us up, you know, what would you do if you were hot on a hot day? Well, you'd put up an umbrella. So some people have tried to figure out, could we create some kind of spray that we could spray up into the air that would create an umbrella to shade us, at least for a while, from the heat that's coming in. Is there a way we could pollute the world more in order to correct for pollution? Now, I'm not saying that, you know, that these people are stupid. I'm saying that given the assumptions that we all share about wanting to keep the world running the way it is, people are going to some extreme measures in our cultural derangement to try to figure out how to do it. You know Richard Branson, Mr. Virgin Airlines? He had this prize he offered several years ago. He was going to, it was billions of dollars he was going to give to somebody who could create a carbon catcher. Did you see that? You know, if we want to be able to keep putting more and more carbon, and our only hope for, you know, development and the growth of the economy, you know, which is the one thing that we can't ever question as a good, if our hope for that is more fossil fuel development and the expansion of, you know, our way of life that we've developed here in the United States, if that's our hope for the world, then we gotta find some way to catch this carbon. So he wanted to see if somebody could make a machine that would catch the carbon and get it out of the air and maybe shove it back down in the earth somewhere. It is a kind of madness, a sort of losing our mind. And so, who or what might save us? I'm so glad that Jordan and Ryan could be here tonight, because as I've looked all around the world, the most hopeful signs I see for a genuine movement to address climate justice is coming from these indigenously led folks who way back when, before the scientists were even hollering about this, were saying, this doesn't make any sense. There's some folk who knew that the white folk were crazy when they first showed up and have been questioning the logic ever since. Reverend Barber and I went out a couple years ago to the World Congress of Religions. They wanted to hear, I think it's every 4 years, they get people from all over the world, from all different religions come together. This one happened to be in Salt Lake City. And they wanted to hear about this moral movement in North Carolina. So we went out there, and Yara came, and she got them all singing our songs, and then Reverend Barber shared your story, and they got all fired up and happy, and people were dancing and speaking in tongues. I mean, you have to speak in tongues at a World Congress of Religions because there's all kinds of languages there. But at any rate, we had a great time. We had a great time sharing the story. The next day, he had to go off somewhere, and I had to go the other direction, and my flight didn't leave till after lunch. So I looked at the schedule, and I saw that the indigenous religious leaders of the world were going to share with the Congress what their sort of take on the state of the world was. And I thought, Lord, I want to hear that. So I went over in this, and there were probably 2,000 or 3,000 people in this huge auditorium, and they had a leader from Nigeria and from New Zealand and from the plains out west in North America, from Mexico, and several folks I can't remember. But one after another, these folks got up and they said basically the same thing. They said, "The earth, our mother, is weeping." They had stories from their own people, from their traditions that they told. They shared with us songs and some of the practices from their tradition. But over and over again, after they shared the story or after they invited us to learn a song, they would say that their tradition revealed to them that the earth was weeping. And I remember hearing there from Chief Arvo Looking Horse, who was there to share about this snake, he called it, this snake of a pipeline that they were trying to put across his people's land, and asked us if we would support stopping that pipeline. It was almost a whole year later when the No Dakota Access Pipeline movement really, became a news story, and it was actually Chief Looking Horse who put out the call asking faith leaders from all traditions to come and support them. And I didn't get to go, but a friend of mine who went told me that he spent a week there in the camp that they had set up. And I said, "Well, how was it?" And he said, "It's incredible." He said, "But this is about a lot more than stopping that pipeline." He said, "I don't know if they'll stop this pipeline, but," he said, "I do know this, that what they're doing there is a school for the kind of resistance that we need in every movement around the world." Here are the people who are showing us a way to understand what's going on in the world, to understand our own faith and moral traditions, and to understand what we must do about it. And so tonight, I'm glad that the folk psalm folks could be here to sing Psalm 37 for us. And I just want to read it a little bit in light of what I've learned from my indigenous sisters and brothers. Seems to me that it fits in real close with what I've learned from my black and brown sisters and brothers here in the United States. I always think about in terms of the challenge of being a Christian preacher. I always think about what Frederick Douglass said in the middle of the 19th century. He said, "Between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I see the widest possible difference." You see, not all Christianities are the same, just like not all Islams or all Buddhisms or even all indigenous faith practices are the same. But at the heart of all of our traditions, what I've seen and what I've heard is that there is this cry to stand up to the powers and principalities that would use and abuse people and anything else that God made. The rivers, the land, the stuff that's up under the land. Maybe when our holy books were written, they didn't even know what some of that stuff was called. But all of it's called creation in terms of that Genesis 1, that original blessing that they were singing earlier. And that is the vision out of which Psalm 37 was originally sung. I think we get the Psalms all wrong when we read them with a British accent, like they come out just like they came down from heaven into the Book of Common Prayer, and they fit in the Westminster Abbey. If you go to Westminster Abbey, to St. Paul Chapel, there's a statue of James Watt, that brother that built the steam engine. He was sainted in the imagery of that place, turned into somebody who should be a statue. And maybe they should have known something. They can tell you the story if you go there. about how when they rolled the statue in, it was so heavy because they had made him so big. I didn't say big-headed. They just, they made him big out of stone. It was so heavy, they say it broke through the floor when they rolled it in. Maybe we should have known something about this imagination that came from Mr. Watt's steam engine and all that it could do. But, if we read these Psalms in that British accent, that we hear from the King's English of the Book of Common Prayer, we miss their original context. Because what the Bible scholars tell us is that the Psalms were written down when the people of Israel were in exile, when they were living under the oppressive rule of that, that blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy that Reverend Barber likes to talk about, who liked to build towers and put his name on them. Nebuchadnezzar was his name back then. And they were living in that exile when they wrote down these psalms as songs of resistance. Not psalms to prop up the established rulers and authorities, but psalms that gave people hope and helped them to focus on what was true and what was right. That's why we were singing earlier, "Do not fret because of the wicked, do not be envious of wrongdoers." I kind of think if they were singing today, they might say, you know what the name of this company is that's developing this pipeline in North Carolina? I mean, especially in light of the dangers of dominion theology, I think this is incredibly important. The name of the company is Dominion. Dominion. And we need some folks on the ground who are willing to sing, "Do not fret because of the wicked." And sure, don't be envious of wrongdoing. Don't be envious of all the wealth and the power that can come from that kind of thing. But trust in the Lord and do what is right, and you will dwell securely in the land. They weren't even on their land. They wanted to get back to their land. They were displaced people, and their land was occupied. And yet this is a resistance song like those we learned to sing here. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. It's a song you learn to sing when you don't have freedom. It's a song you learn to sing to keep the hope alive that one day, sure enough, we're going to be free. Vincent Harding used to say, I sat in hundreds of churches down south and sang, "We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome." He said, I felt the power of that song in those churches, little groups of people who didn't have any power, who believed that they could change things. He said, I knew for sure the power of that song when I turned on the TV and they were singing it in Tiananmen Square. All right? A song of resistance that can go all the way around the world. I was in Baghdad in 2003 when they were dropping the bombs from the air, and there were some little kids in the street, and when we got up to them, they were singing, and they were singing in Arabic, but I knew the tune. We shall overcome. These songs of resistance are what give us the heart of our tradition and the heart of what we know is possible if we trust, if we do what is right. And so I thought, as a preacher from the country, I could stop by and say this evening that I know we've all heard preachers that say, the important thing is that it's well with your soul because you're going to heaven when you die. But there's at least a few of us preachers that want to say, keep on singing the songs of resistance and keep on praying those prayers of resistance, because if you pay attention to their words, I mean even the ones they taught you in the churches where they said that. I learned to pray, give us this day our daily bread, and I learned to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I ain't trying to get whisked off to heaven. No, I'm trying to learn the songs that we can sing that will grow us up into a movement that can link up with other people who are singing resistant songs all over the world, and not only turn the tide on this climate change, but see how it's connected to everything that we talk about here at the gathering, how it's connected to poverty, how it's connected to education, how it's connected to our health care, how it's connected to the war economy that we're going to talk about next month. And so since we are learning to sing resistance songs, we got one more resistance psalm, a poem that a sister from the Marshall Islands wrote. And Eric's going to pull up the video here. While he's getting that ready, let me just say that when we talked to 350.org about partnering on this, Bill McKibben, who helped to start 350, he said, you know, if you're going to talk about global warming, you really should recognize that it's global. And that when we talk about the poor suffering first, some of the poor are on islands in the Pacific Ocean that are already going under. And so Kathy went to the United Nations a few years ago, and she wrote this poem to her young son and shared it at the United Nations. This is a video that includes not only the poem, but some images from the Marshall Islands and from the resistance that's springing up all around the world.
Dear Matafele Benum, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as the Buddha. Your thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matafele Benum, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day, that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of your seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matafele Benum, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas, no backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals, no blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. Because baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, dimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and floods of Pakistan, Algeria, and Colombia, and hurricanes, tidal waves, and earthquakes didn't exist, still, there are those who see us. Hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing. We are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street, marching with signs, hand in hand, chanting for change now. They're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us. Because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Matafele Benum, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes, baby, and sleep in peace. Because we won't let you down. You'll see.
Hello.
Hello, Kathy. Welcome to the gathering.
Having me.
Hey, these folks here have just seen your poem. Thanks so much for sharing it with us.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for sharing it.
So we just finished watching the video. Can you let us know what's going on these days and how folks here could get involved with the Pacific Climate Warriors?
So basically, the Marshall Islands and a lot of the Pacific is really gearing up for this COP23, the Conference of the Parties out in Bonn, Germany. It's a big year for the Pacific because it's the first time that the president of the COP will be a Pacific Islander. It's a Fijian, Frank Bainimarama, and he's a leader from Pacific. And so we're trying to make this the Pacific COP as much as possible. And so we're really trying to show up and show out with, our stories and the ways in which we've survived and are continuing to thrive despite all of the effects of climate change. And so the way that people can get involved is to join our Have Your Say climate movement, which we're asking people to take photographs of themselves and share why they believe in climate action and why they believe in stronger climate action. Take photos of themselves with a flower or using a flower in some way. It's called Have Your Say, SEI, and say is a Samoan word from the Samoan Islands for flower. And we'd also like people to sign our declaration. Yeah, so join our social media campaign and sign our declaration online, haveyoursay.sei.org.
Great, thanks so much. I was gonna tell you that we don't have so many flowers blooming here right now, but I asked my daughter to make a flower so that folks here could take pictures tonight. So she's made this sort of tissue paper flower, and as she was making it, I was telling her that it's a symbol of power for you all and strength for the resistance. And she was making it, and she said, "Wait a second, do they need strength to resist us?" And I said, "Well, that's what we have to decide. Are we going to join with folks in this struggle, or are we going to be part of what they're struggling against?" So thank you for letting us know how we could join you tonight, and thanks so much for that video.
No, thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. Please tag yourselves and tag me in the photos if you guys upload anything. That'd be amazing.
All right, have your say. Have your say, SEI.
Have your say, SEI.
All right. Thanks so much, Kathy. All right, so who wants the flower first? Have a selfie, have your say. Is there a child? Yeah. Anybody? All right, well, I'll pass that around. Just as we're closing out here tonight, we're going to be passing around a call to action. This is a call directly from our sisters and brothers whose homes are going underwater as the sea levels rise. The Have Your Say campaign is about much more than a hashtag, much more than a picture. It's about communities committing to no new carbon in order to stem the tide of the rising seas and the global warming. So please learn more about that. Also, 350 is organizing communities around the country this year who will go to their city or town councils and ask for local legislation on no new carbon. You can be part of that by going to 350.org and learning more about their campaign. As Jacob mentioned earlier, Our Children's Trust is the name of the organization that is supporting the Youth v. Gov lawsuit, and so we encourage you to follow that. And finally, because we know that climate change is a part of this campaign of poor people around the world rising up to say that we have power to speak for ourselves and to change the world that is into the world that ought to be, we encourage you to join the Poor People's Campaign. If you're here, hope you got information on the way in. If you're online, go to breachrepairers.org and learn more about the Poor People's Campaign. Now, as we close out this evening, I want to invite our blues and jazz band to come and lead us out with a little fusion with our bluegrass band. Let's see if we can find something we can all sing together as we're going out. Thanks so much, y'all.
together. Welcome to the gathering.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it down.
A few years ago, a gathering began, a fusion coalition. The New Testament has that word in Greek that we translate church, but that word in common English is really the gathering. That's right. And the gathering of people who wouldn't have any other good reason to be together, but something brought them together. That's that ecclesia, that gathering.
We've got to challenge the war economy. Right now, because of military arrogance, taxpayers in the United States are spending nearly $4 trillion for wars since 2001. That money could have been used to transform our nation. $1 billion of our bloated military budget could pay for 12,000 elementary school teachers, 17,000 infrastructure jobs, 100,000 Head Start slots for children, 30,000 scholarships for university students. Now the question is, what will make us safer? More and more and more and more money for building the mother of all bombs, or money for jobs, education, healthcare, and infrastructure? That's the question. And that's the question we must put before America.
Well, Reverend Barber, I believe we have a gathering. We have a gathering, and that's where we're going to start.